Hello and welcome to this edition of Beyond the Politics, a regular examination of the events happening right here in the Quinte region and the people who work so hard behind the scenes to make it all happen. I'm your host, Paul Martin. Joining me, Fire Chief and Director of Emergency Services for the City of Belleville, coming back on the show for the second time, Monique Belair.
Good morning, Paul. Thank you for having me back again.
It is great to have you here as always. So, we're going to talk about so many things because so many things have happened since the last time you were here. But during your first appearance, of course, we talked about Camp Molly, which has taken off in a big way. But just for people who didn't see it then, or maybe who need to be refreshed on what it is, tell us a little bit about what Camp Molly is.
So Camp Molly is an initiative that's twofold. One is obviously it's about trying to provide information to females between the age of 15 and 18 about the possibilities of having a career in fire services. And one of the issues is everybody thinks it's the red truck. So if I'm afraid of heights, I can't be a firefighter. But there's so much more to the fire service, and that's what the camp encompasses. We talk about fire investigations, communications, prevention, education, training, and of course, the suppression activities, medical emergency responses. So there's that portion of it that we wanted to be informative about. But the second part is about working on young women's self-esteem. And we know that that's critical in our young females. The Women's Foundation of Canada did a study, and in grade 6, 37% of young girls identified with having a self-esteem issue. By the time they get into grade 10, it drops all the way down to 13%. So that's pre-COVID. So we obviously know that COVID has had an effect on our teenagers. So it's twofold. For me specifically is as a female role model in a leadership role, that's had my own challenges obviously throughout my career, the past 36 years. I want to ensure that these women know that they can reach out, that the possibilities are endless, and I never ever want someone to be told that they cannot do something based on their gender.
Now we're going to talk about the program, how it began, as we talked about before, how it developed and how it's expanded. But first, we actually have a video because as part of developing this and telling people, you can't be there to tell them every single time as eloquently as you just then, but you wanted people to know about it. So this video has been developed to tell people exactly what's involved with Camp Molly.
But like after coming and like getting to experience everything, it's made me feel more comfortable.
The girls here are super kind. Everyone here has the same goals of trying to explore their future and becoming a firefighter.
Do it. It's like if you want to join it, join it. It'll be good and you will enjoy it. You'll have fun.
It has been incredible. It is so cool seeing all these young women getting this education.
The 3 mottos is be prepared to be challenged, be prepared to be empowered, and be prepared to change the way you see yourself.
Camp Molly is this huge thing, and it's expanding and it's growing and that. But that is not what your primary job is. So in addition to arranging all those things, putting the board of directors together and expanding it beyond this country even, you of course are not just the fire chief, because we were talking about this beforehand either. This is a general misconception. People think the fire chief is just the fire chief. No. Fire chief and director of emergency services, which means if there's a citywide emergency, the person who takes charge is you.
That's correct.
So talk a little bit about what the role of Fire Chief and Director of Emergency Services is in cases of things like flooding, for example, because we're heading into flooding season.
Yes, we are. And actually we're in talks with Quinte, Hastings County about it. Excuse me. So yes, a lot of fire chiefs in the province of Ontario wear 2 hats. So yes, we're responsible for emergency response and prevention and everything else that's related to the delivery of fire protection services under the FPPA. But we have a dual hat, which is we are responsible for the emergency management preparations for your municipality. So here I am, the CEMC, the Community Emergency Management Coordinator, as designated under legislation by Emergency Management Ontario.
Was during the fire that we had in Belleville back in October. for anyone who may not remember. There was a large fire in Belleville, October, involving some building materials. It involved a large plume that then spread out and deposited some material over a several block radius closer to the east side of town, center east, though it was in some cases felt further away. But an immediate area that's actually quite sizable had to be evacuated. Can you talk about what it was like in those first few hours in terms of galvanizing everyone and getting that operation together? Because that was certainly one of the biggest evacuation efforts we've had in Belleville in quite some time.
Well, it was interesting because I actually was not the senior officer on call, so my deputy was, and he gave me a call, and I live outside of Belleville, and I got the phone. He says, "Wow, it's massive, Chief. I think you need to get down here. We've got a major emergency going on." So I was coming actually over the 401, and you could see the flames all the way. It was dark out, and I think for the first few seconds it was like, okay, this is a big one. And we weren't sure what was exactly on fire at the time. They were still setting up. So when I arrived on scene, we had already started mutual aid. Obviously, we didn't have enough of a water source, so we had to get our partners in to do tanker shuttle. We had to get another aerial in to assist. So we're coordinating all the firefighting efforts, but then there's that emergency management piece of, okay, now we need Ministry of Environment in, because now we need to worry about what is it? Is it hazmat? So we're calling Canutech to make sure. We weren't sure. There's no MSDS sheets when it's outside like that. So the difference is, one of the challenges is, so we have wind, it's blowing all over, we don't know what the particulate is that's flying around. When you go to a building and it's inside a building and it's nighttime and you know there's no employees, so you're not really stressed about having to do a primary search, there's MSDS sheets that will tell you what's actually burning inside. We didn't have any of that information when we were out there. So that was a challenge for us, is trying to identify that as quickly as possible. How close could we get to the fire without putting our own employees at risk? Everybody had to be in the proper PPE for it. Working with Canutech, like I said. One of the resources that we called in, and some people might not be aware of it, is we actually reached out to Trenton and got their crash truck out, which is a foam. It has much larger capacity for foam than we do. What we thought would blanket the particulate and stop the spread. Then you're worried about water runoff for an emergency. Did it get into the storm drains? We had to get our water department out and activate them. Then you're still trying to, I'm still trying to provide updates to the mayor, who's obviously worried about the situation, and then the CAO. Letting him know, do we need to activate it at this time? Where we were lucky is that, yes, it was a residential area, but it was further enough away that we didn't have to worry about traffic and overhead planes and that flying because of the time of night. So we did not actually activate the EOC, but department heads were definitely kept informed for their input, because we did need roads, we did need transit because we did evacuate. So we did have a city transit bus come down to house people that needed to be, until we could get the Quinte Sports Center. We did open up the shelter for people to go to that needed to go there. And then as daylight came, working with the Ministry of Environment is it safe for children to walk in the streets with the particulate? So they were doing air samples at the time, so some schools were delayed with their opening until we could ensure the safety of the students.
What can you as well say about how the entire city pulled together? Because I know several police officers received commendations for their work in terms of helping evacuate, going door to door to help you, as well blocking off streets and making sure that entire operation moved. But it seems like there were so many working parts and they all worked so well together at a time it was really needed.
Absolutely, and they even brought their drone out, because fire department doesn't have a drone, so they brought their drone out and assisted with that. The overwhelming support of, we had a full alarm, general alarm, which means every single one of our firefighters was called back. All of our volunteers were called back, all of our mutual aid partners. So we had Quinte, we had Mohawk, we had Tyna Denegan assisting with us. Then we had Belleville Police in, we had water department. So everybody just seemed to come together and work really well. So honestly, for that kind of, you prepare for it, but you train for it, but you don't really know until it happens. And from my perspective as the fire chief, this would be my opportunity, honestly, to say thank you to all of our partners and everyone that came out in support of it. They were phenomenal And my firefighters did a fantastic job, fantastic job. I have a phenomenal fire department.
Thanks to everyone who was part of that operation and who also works every single day to keep the people of Belleville safe. So thank you for putting that together, and don't put your coffee on the girder once it's finished out there anymore. Talk about the polar plunge, because there's so many things that you do in the community and for the community and for Camp Molly, but also there's some fun things, challenging things, and one's coming up very soon, and I will not be joining you. But I salute you because I'm not a cold weather person, but apparently you are.
So Sherry Meeks, Inspector Meeks, reached out to us again because this is the police's charity, and she challenges fire again to it. But somehow I managed to get us a ringer this year, and Councillor Chatton is joining Belleville Fire and coming in with us. So I'm actually going to hold her hand this year to go in, like Chief Callahan held mine last year. I think this year is even worse than last year, and anybody that knows me, it takes 3 seconds to know I hate being cold.
And we're talking about the polar plunge.
Yes,
yeah.
I absolutely hate being cold. So the fact that I jumped into freezing cold water is amazing in itself. The fact I'm going to redo it again this year, knowing exactly how cold that water literally is. When they say it takes your breath away, it takes your breath away. So I'm really excited because it's such a good cause. But am I excited about doing the plunge? Not really. I'm not a huge fan of jumping in the cold water, but it's for such a great cause. And you know, that rivalry between Guns and Hoses is always there. So we'll see who raises the most money this year.
Were you prepared the first time? Like, I mean, we've seen it, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who, at least for a brief second, have thought, next year I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it in connection with this charity or this. What was it like that very first time you did it?
So it's funny because I should have watched Chief Callahan, because he holds my hand and we both go to take the plunge. But he did the one where he just did it like this, so it only came here. I'm thinking, no, we go full on in. So I went right down, came back up. He was already out of the water and I was still in the water. I think my hair froze the minute I got up. And you know the funniest thing was, honestly, the coldest part was my feet. Trying to climb the ladder to get back out, my feet just froze. And anybody that sees the advertising that they're using, they couldn't have found a better picture, because my face is worth 1,000 words about just how cold it really was.
Okay, we got about 45 seconds left. Daylight savings time is coming up, which of course is the perfect time to talk about replacing the batteries in your smoke and CO2 detectors. Okay,
so one important thing, and the messaging is starting to change, is that remember, some of the smoke alarms out there have a 10-year life expectancy for the battery. So just double check that, because environmentally wise, you may not need to actually throw it away, because your model has a 10-year life expectancy. So just double check that. We always recommend that you change them at least once a year, but we have the old adage, you know, change your clocks, change your batteries, so it's never really a bad thing. But just on the environmental side, like again, I wanted to repeat, just double check, because you might have one that is good for 10 years.
And make sure you have the plan to keep you and your family safe. Thank you, Chief Belair, for telling us about Camp Molly. This has been Beyond the Politics.